Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Price Check Sports Podcast, brought to you by the In the Zone Network, where we go city to city, state to state, worldwide. We are down to the final two teams battling out for the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Of course, the NBA Finals are finally upon us, kicking off tomorrow night, Thursday, June 6th. Gotta say, this is a series that I think is going to be very, very interesting from a matchup standpoint. Of course, you got the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference, Dallas Mavericks representing the West. Celtics, of course, have been a juggernaut all season long, of course, all playoffs long, having lost just a combined 20 games all season, went 64-18 in the regular season, and of course, just 12-2 here in the postseason. And for them, they're on a pretty short list in terms of teams who have gone into the NBA Finals with 20 or fewer losses. You're talking about some of the historic teams like the 86 Celtics, team that only lost once at home the entire regular season and playoffs. You got the 87 Lakers. We're talking 96 Bulls, of course, the team that went 72-10 in the regular season. Both, I believe, the 2017 and 2018 Warriors. You got some teams on that list that are pretty historic in terms of what they were able to pull off. And this Celtics team, of course, trying to join rare company there and being able to finish this season off with their 18th championship all time. And then this Mavericks team, of course, their third ever finals appearance, 1-1 so far. Of course, both of those previous matchups coming against the Miami Heat. First time, of course, 2006, losing to Dwayne Wade in the Miami Heat, and then, of course, ultimately beating LeBron James in the Miami Heat Big Three in 2011 behind a crazy, crazy series from Dirk Nowitzki. So, matchup that has been, talked about a little bit so far across a number of different media platforms. A lot of it has come down to, folks thinking Luke and Kyrie will be the better duo. Is this Jason Tatum's time to show that he really is, one of the top 3 to 5 best players in the NBA? And so we'll analyze a few of these different storylines and angles as far as how the Celtics will potentially pull off a win, how the Mavericks will potentially pull off a win. But then ultimately we'll also get down at the end of this to some of y'all favorite segments, of course, the bets that we want to look at and odds for this particular series. And so first, let's evaluate things from the Dallas side, right? Biggest thing that they need to, of course, key in on or maybe even worry about coming out of the series that we just saw them play against Minnesota, three-point shooting. They got a lot of clutch threes from guys like Derrick Jones Jr., P.J. Washington a little bit less than what he had done in the previous series against Oklahoma City. But, those role players were giving them a lot of big buckets when they needed it. And you got to ask whether or not that's going to be something that can sustain against a team like the Celtics that does have not only star power, but they have really, really high-end role players like Derek White, Drew Holiday, Al Horford, and, of course, we'll have a healthy Porzingis back for this series as well. So you look at that. Will they be able to sustain the three-point shooting from those role guys? This, is a team in Boston that does not give up a ton of corner threes. And, of course, I'm kind of crossing over a little bit here in terms of key factors, but Boston does not give up a lot of corner threes. They'll give up some of those three-pointers above the break, but definitely not giving you that easy corner three much. So when you talk about, how they defend Luka in terms of the pick and roll and his ability to find guys in those corners coming off of the pick and roll, that's going to be something that can be a make or break, factor here come this series, because if they're not giving up those corner threes to guys like Derrick Jones Jr., P.J. Washington, and also being able to take away some of those lobs to guys like Gafford and Lively, puts even that much more pressure on Luka and Kyrie to be able to create one-on-one. And I think if you're the Celtics, that's probably the way that you want to go in terms of forcing the hand of those two stars either way. So definitely something that we're going to keep an eye on that, because, of course, the more that you give Dallas those open three-pointers and the ability to build confidence for those role players, the easier it becomes for guys like Luka and Kyrie to get the shots that they want. Because, of course, now you've got to guard a couple of different things on each different position as opposed to just being able to key in on them. So that's the first factor that I'm looking into for Dallas, something that I'm going to keep my eye on very early in this series, especially given that these these series is going to start in Boston here in games 1 and 2. So That's the first thing. Defensive matchups for Dallas is going to be a big factor as well. You got Kristaps Porzingis coming back now for the Celtics. That's going to throw a little bit of a wrinkle into the defensive matchups for Dallas. Do you put a PJ Washington on him, or do you stick PJ Washington on guys like Tatum, maybe Horford here and there, depending on what the lineups are? Are you really going to trust your bigs like Gafford and Lively to be able to go out and defend the three-point line with Porzingis? Now, granted, him coming off of this injury, they're probably not going to play him 30 to 35 minutes a game, at least to start out. But for the 20 to 25 minutes a game that he's probably going to be on the court, do you trust your big guys not only to be able to help protect the rim, but also be able to chase Kristaps off the three-point line, contest those three-pointers without fouling? So, Porzingis is definitely a wild card for the Celtics in that not only does he add an added layer for them offensively, he's also going to help them defensively with, some rim protection things they just did not have in the series before this. So, I think if you're Dallas, the one thing you have to be concerned with is guys like Lively and Gafford having to chase out and guard Porzingis, given that they really haven't had to see that much in this playoffs up until now. Saw it a little bit against Oklahoma City and guarding Chet Holmgren, but Chet also just didn't have a very great shooting series against Dallas. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be really different for them coming into the finals that they just have not seen all postseason long. And I'm interested to see how they adjust to that moving forward to start the series. And now, final thing for Dallas in terms of key factors. Is this just Luka's moment? We've seen it time and time again with young NBA stars where sometimes they just take over and you can't really do anything about it. We saw it not necessarily with the finals win, but 2007 with a 22-year-old LeBron James taking out the Detroit Pistons, who had been, holding the Eastern Conference down and having a lock on the Eastern Conference for the few years before that. We talk about, even just like Anthony Edwards and the star-making performance that he was having up until last round and when they ran into Dallas. Those types of coming-out parties. Now, granted, Luka is a little bit older now. He's, in that 24 to 25 range. But is this just a time where he ascends to that next level of being, either the face of the league or just having that added layer of superstardom that comes with winning your first championship? It could be. It could very well be. We know Luka has been hard to stop. A lot of people are talking about how many guys the Celtics have to be able to throw at him. And granted, they have a lot of options in terms of primary defenders for him. But do you really want to put that type of workload on Jason Tatum and making him guard Luka and have to be your go-to guy on offense? Is Jaylen Brown going to be up for that challenge, not only being the primary defender on Luka, but then having to still go and score 20, 25, maybe even 30 points on the other end to help bring the Celtics a win? Are guys like Drew Holiday, Derek White going to have the size to be able to sustain going up against Luka for an entire series? While they have a lot of options, there's still some question marks about all of those options. I think Luka's probably going to get his most of the series. There's a bet that we'll get to a little bit later on player props, but you can take Luka to score 30 points or more in every game of the series. I believe those odds are somewhere between plus 600, plus 700 as of right now. Sounds like a good bet to me, because even if I'm the Celtics, looking at it like Luka can have his, we just want to make sure the other guys don't eat. So that's one area where I'm looking at where maybe Dallas is able to just get over the hump because Luka's like, hey, hop on my back, boys. I'm going to bring us home. So those are the kind of the factors that I'm looking at for Dallas. Now, on the Boston side of this, we mentioned them getting a healthy Kristaps Porzingis back. He's definitely going to unlock their offensive ability, having that added shooting, having the ability to stretch the floor from the 5 position, and then also just a rim protection standpoint. They have not had the same level of rim protection without him as they did with him, even going up against the Pacers. The Pacers shot something crazy like 70% from the floor at the rim. So when you think about, how he could potentially deter some of the lobs for Dallas or just some of the easy layups that guys like Kyrie and Luka are able to get, That's going to definitely be big for Boston on the defensive end, just as it will be on the offensive end here to start this series. The other thing we mentioned, of course, who's the primary defender on Luka. I would imagine it's probably going to be Jaylen Brown to start, since you can get some of that offense out of guys like Derek White, Drew Holiday. Obviously, you're going to lean on Jason Tatum for most of that, but Jaylen Brown gives you that interesting fit of he has, kind of the bulk to be able to bang with Luka. He also has the quickness to be able to shut off some of those driving lanes and things. So I think Brown's probably the ideal start in terms of primary defender. If that stays that way for the entire series, that's yet to be seen. But I think he's probably the best option long-term for the series in terms of being able to not only keep Luka somewhat in check, but also still be able to give you enough offensively to where you're not wearing him down throughout an entire series. And the other thing for Boston, we talked about Dallas and the corner threes. We got to talk about Boston and the three-point shooting in general. We've seen in times where they've struggled and times that they've lost big games because they just go cold shooting, and they also make it a little bit harder on themselves in terms of only being able to go and seek out the three-point shot as opposed to finding other avenues of offense. What are the adjustments going to be for them, Coach Joe Mazzulla and that offense if the threes aren't falling? Do you get, Tatum more touches in terms of posting up, free throw line extended or on the block? Are you running more sets for guys like Porzingis near the rim for post-up opportunities, since he really doesn't have a matchup that's going to test him in terms of guys that he's going to be able to shoot over? That 7'3" frame, he's of course got much longer wingspan. He'll be able to get his shot off over a lot of those different defenders that Dallas are going to throw at him. So how do you adjust offensively in those situations when the three ball is not falling? Because this is not the series where you just keep chunking them up and hoping they fall. Dallas is definitely going to take advantage of that. They're going to try to run at different points to get some good transition offense and easy buckets, but they're also going to see where they can hunt on offense for guys like Luka and Kyrie to be able to get easy shots as well. So, of course, Boston and that three ball definitely going to be a very key factor here in the entire series. Now, in terms of prediction, we saw that Scott Foster, Tony Brothers are going to be two of the lead referees on this series. That signals to me that the league wants this to be a longer series, and to be quite honest, it probably favors Boston in terms of some of the calls that you might see in Boston, things like that. Now, with all of that said, I do think the Dallas Mavericks are going to always have the best player on the floor, which is Luka. Can Luka do enough in terms of being able to just night in, night out offensively really just obliterate and kill the Celtics to the point where not only do they not have enough answer defensively to be able to stop him, it affects how they're able to respond offensively. Of course, I'm not a Celtics fan. Y'all know, Lakers fan, not rooting for the Celtics at all. But I do think that this is one of those matchups where the Celtics probably are best equipped to defend Luka and kind of slow him down. However, we've seen it time and time again with Luka. We say that going into these series where, they have this guy that they can throw at him, or they, kind of have these players that they can throw at him. I mean, we saw Clippers series, a couple games where Kawhi was healthy. Of course, they tried to put him on him, tried to put Paul George on him, tried Terrence Mann. It didn't work. We saw, Lou Dort. We saw Jalen Williams. Hell, we even saw a couple times Shai Gilgeous-Alexander against him in the Oklahoma City series. Didn't work. We saw Anthony Edwards. We saw Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson. Minnesota didn't have enough. So, as much as I think Boston is the better team from top to bottom, I do think in the finals it matters when you have the best guy on the floor. We saw it in 2022 with Boston. They went up against Stephen Curry, had a 2-1 series lead in that series, and then didn't win another game. Steph turned into the best player on the court, and they just had no response for it. Now, granted, Boston, they hadn't been there. That was the first time this particular group had gotten to the finals, and maybe they learned from that series. But I think when you look at it in totality and you see what Luka can do and how he does it on a night-in, night-out basis, it's very hard for me to pick against Dallas knowing that they got the best guy on the court at all times. So with that said, I think I'm probably gonna go Dallas in 6. It's gonna be a hard series for both teams. I don't think this is gonna be something where even if the Celtics win, I don't necessarily see them winning in a sweep or 5 games. There's a world where they could do that. Again, they run through every series up until this point. But I also don't think they've seen anything like what Luka and Kyrie can bring to the table so far in the series that they've played. They went up against a Miami Heat team with no Jimmy Butler. They went up against a Cavs team that by the end of it did not have Donovan Mitchell, did not have Karis LeVert, did not have Jared Allen. They're just coming off a Pacers series where Tyrese Halliburton missed the final 2 games and re-injured himself, in the second game. So when you look at all of that and you take all of that into account, I think it matters when you have the best guy, and I think that is going to ultimately be what brings Dallas over the hump and gets Luka and that team their first championship. And so, interested to see again just how all of the different matchups play out and the adjustments that each team makes going through each game of the series. I do think this is going to be one of the better finals that we've had here in recent years. We had a little bit of a snooze fest last year with the Miami Heat going up against the Denver Nuggets. We knew that was kind of inevitable with the Nuggets and the type of run that they were having. The 2022 series between the Warriors and Celtics was pretty good. 2021, of course, we saw Giannis and the Bucks beat the Suns in the 6-game or so. I think this one has a chance to at least be at the level of the 21-22 finals, if not above it. And I think though, just we're gonna see Luka at a different level. He has not had the opportunity to play in an NBA Finals, but we also have seen in the playoffs in general. Even though he hasn't had many playoff games just yet, the playoff games he's had, he's one of the best scorers all time in playoff history. So I think that sustains itself throughout this series. And I do think that you're going to hear from Kyrie at some point in this series with a big game when the Mavericks need it most. And so I'm taking the Mavericks in 6 games. Again, think it's going to be a very close series. There are going to be a lot of close games that come down to 1 or 2 different breaks. But when it's all said and done, I think Luka and the Mavericks are the ones that are holding the Larry O'Brien trophy. So, to get into some of our favorite bets of the series before we go, a lot of these are kind of longer shot series type bets. Nothing just yet for game 1. I'll maybe post something on the Instagram for that. But in terms of bets that I like most for the series, going from safest odds to longer shots. First one, Jaylen Brown, 20-plus points in every game of the series, plus 165 on FanDuel. I like that one. He's coming off of averaging 25 a game against the Pacers. I do think offensively he'll have the ability to be able to kind of score a little bit more freely. I think from the Dallas defensive standpoint, they're probably going to key in a lot more on Jason Tatum. So 20-plus points per game, or 20-plus points every game for Jaylen Brown at plus 165. I like that. Jason Tatum, 25 or more points every single game, plus 220. I do also like that. I think these are going to be closer games for the most part. And I think as long as the games are close, Tatum should be at 25 points. If he doesn't get 25 points in the game, that's probably going to be a bad sign for the Celtics, or either they're just blowing him out to the point where he doesn't need to play in the fourth quarter. But like both of those bets from a Boston standpoint. Now, on the Dallas side of things, 2 bets that I like in their favor. You've got Boston to win game 1 with the Mavericks to win the series, plus 430 on FanDuel. So, of course, need Boston to win game 1. You just need Dallas to finish out the series and win it regardless of how many games. You get that at plus 430 odds. And then the other bet, it's a much longer shot, plus 6,500 on a correct order of how the games will finish. And so the way we're predicting this, of course, I picked Dallas in 6. The way we're looking at this to get the best odds on it, Boston wins game 1, Dallas wins game 2, Boston wins game 3, Dallas wins games 4, 5, and 6. So that's how we're going to play that in terms of Dallas winning in 6. Correct score, you get that at plus 6,500 odds on FanDuel. So I do think those are kind of my favorites in terms of longer shot bets. Again, we'll talk through some actual game-by-game bets as the series goes along. But that's kind of where we're leaning and what we're looking forward to so far with the NBA Finals. Again, so happy to have these tip-off tomorrow. For the folks that are in St. Louis, please remember, I will be joining the High Off the Glass watch party for Game 1 tomorrow at the Cola Lounge here in St. Louis. So make sure, of course, if you're here local, you want to pull up, watch the game. Of course, cannabis-friendly environment, whether you want to smoke, whether you want to purchase. Either way, you have the ability to do all of the above at the event. There's going to be some prizes given out, some trivia going on before the game starts, and, of course, some live commentary by myself and Older Great. So that'll do it for today's preview, man. Looking forward to a great NBA Finals. Hoping it lives up to all the hype for us. And we're going to be breaking down every single game of it here on The Price Check. Now, until next time, of course, I am your host, Josh Price. Check it out.